Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Women Serve 2. Today we have Jane Babcock with us. She had served from 1982 to 2004, received four DD-214s totaling 8.5 years, 13 years USAR. 4 years later, she became a nationally accredited County Veteran Service Officer. During her 11.5 years as a CVSO, she filed over 1,000 claims on behalf of the family. Now she volunteers to give her e-tools, do one-on-one calls, and guest on various media. So today we are going to be talking about a lot about the veteran benefits that you may not be aware of. So Jane, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely glad to be here.
So one thing that I like to do is I always like the guest to talk about her military experience. So tell us why you joined, what you did, how your journey took you to where you are today.
Okay, well, behind me, you will see my dad and my grandfather. They both served in World War II. My grandfather served in World War I also. And I don't think you can see it, but that's a Lady Columbia. That's the World War I Purple Heart. So that's why I joined. My father had a harem, 5 daughters, a wife, and a bitch dog. So he thought the family history was done. But after 3.5 years on my first active duty tour contract of 4 years, I called him up and said, I outrank you. He made corporal, I made sergeant.
Such a good flex. How did he take it?
He laughed and he had so much fun with it. Of course, every time I went home on leave, he would take me down to the Elks Club or the Kiwanis Club and, introduce me to all the guys. But that time we had made a bet before I left for basic training that I would outrank him and that he would have to salute me. So we were at the club that one day and I said, Corporal Cook, attention. I made him stand up and salute me in front of all of his buddies. So that felt really good. Everybody, of course, I don't remember leaving there too much because everybody wanted to buy me a round of drink.
You have to celebrate. So you joined in 1982. What was your job? Because you had four DD-214s. I didn't even realize that was a thing.
Yeah, I first enlisted. I was a kid that liked to take apart the toaster and the clock and try and put it back together. And computers were just really becoming a thing. So I went into electronic maintenance. It happened to be the crypto field because I asked them for the longest school I could get. First one, they said, you'll have to wait 6 months to get to leave. And I went, no, that's too long. I might chicken out. So I took the crypto field, which was only a 2-month wait, and worked for a month, took a month off, and then left for basic.
Nice. Okay. So you went through basic training, you got out, and then you became this VR rep or VR benefits guru, if you will. So kind of talk us through what made you become so advocate for veteran benefit.
Well, part of it was my finding out that I was eligible for veterans benefits 4 years after I had been injured while on active duty, a 45-day set of orders, and then came back to the reserve unit. A few months later, basically woke up and was losing the sensation in my right arm. I'd blown out a disc. While on the 45-day orders, I'd broken my elbow, injured my shoulder and my neck, and not realized how bad it was until a couple months later, back at home station, I walked in and I said, the surgeon wants to cut my throat and wire up my neck and replace the disc with a cadaver disc. And they went, oh, aren't you lucky you got your 20 plus? Because I had 21 and a half in. Here, sign here. You're in the retired reserves. And I was so stoned on Vicodin at the time, I didn't know to ask questions. And that was it. That was the end of my military career in 60 seconds. No exit physical, no exit, party, no, not even a retirement flag.
Oh my gosh.
Bye. We were a small detachment. I do not hold it against our unit administrator. We had no first sergeant slot, no XO slot. That was all up the company level. And nobody at company, they must have decided it was too much work because I found out later it would have taken over 3 years of my time to get a medical board. It still takes at least 2, almost 3 years for a reservist or National Guard member to get a board.
Oh my gosh, that's so long.
Yep. So there's a lot of reserve and National Guard that should have been medically separated. And depending on how much active duty time and how many total years you have in, you may qualify for severance which really taking the VA pay over time is better off than taking a severance. But a lot of them would have gotten immediate pay and immediate TRICARE if they had gone through a medical board.
So what is like the medical board process?
Well, from my understanding, I can really only speak from the reserve side, but from my understanding on the active duty side too, basically they just say, okay, you have medical conditions that may or may not make you unfit for duty and damaged enough that you can't retrain into a new MOS. Obviously, guy that's special forces, does a really physical MOS, and then gets injured and he can't do the special forces thing, say a minor back injury, but he could retrain into supply. But then again, supply has a lot of physical demand too. So do we need to look at retraining him into radio operator where he might not have? But so they go through that whole process of saying at what point. And you could have a lot of minor injuries or, not disqualifying injuries or illnesses in service that do not make you unfit for duty. So those won't be considered on your medical board. There might only be one or two things that are making you, quote, unfit for duty. In my case, because of my neck and the two torn tendons in my shoulder and the rotator cuff that were torn, I couldn't wear battle rattle and I couldn't wear Kevlar. And because of the metal, I was having migraines that were putting me in the emergency room at least once or twice a month, plus multiple other migraines throughout the month. So I couldn't function to do my job. So I would have been unfit for duty. And then they would have looked at, okay, how much time do you have in? How much active duty time do you have? In my case, I had over 8.5 years of active duty. So they would have said, okay, yes, you're well over 8 years. We're going to go ahead and look at giving you your pay and your TRICARE. So, but nobody knew. They just knew that over 20 years, you could be transferred into the retired reserves. That also allowed that if you're got your 20 plus in the reserves or National Guard, and you're thinking about getting out, you can either totally exit where they can't call you back, or you can go into the retired reserve status, which allows you to gain 15 membership points per year. So that's
interesting.
That can make a difference in your paycheck when you do start drawing it.
How does that work? I didn't even know that was a thing.
Every year you're in the reserves or in the inactive reserves, you receive 15 membership points. So retired reserves is an inactive status. You're still subject to recall, but it takes an act of Congress. So that allows you to get those 15 membership points. So in my case, that was another 150 points plus that I was getting just being on standby.
That's so crazy. So for those who aren't very familiar with the reserves, how does the point system work?
Well, it's kind of weird. You do a weekend, which is 2 days, but you get 4 unit training assemblies. They call them UTAs. So you get 4 points. But when you go to your summer camp, you're on active duty for training, just as if they were sending you to a school. It's not standard active duty, but you get 1 point per day. So at the end of the year, you could have 48 UTAs plus 14 or 15 summer camp points. And you could also volunteer. Like when we had our NCO call every month, that was on an unpaid status. So we got a point for going to the training assembly.
How many points do you need to retire?
Active duty, you need 7,200. With one of my reserve guys, he did a lot of ADSW, active duty special work. I guess they call it by another name now, but he did a lot of tours up at Fort McCoy as a range trainer. So he had like 26 years in, but he had 7,200 points. So he actually got an active duty retirement.
Nice.
On the reserve side, you only have to have 50 points per year. So you can miss a couple UTAs but generally speaking, you're going to have to do your summer camp to get your points. You can also earn points through training, the correspondence course system, but most people try their best to attend all their trainings.
Interesting. I did not know that. And especially with the retirement, because I know like a lot of people will do the 20 to get the retirement and then just get out because of essentially the benefits. But I didn't realize you could get additional points in retirement.
Yep. Yeah, and that can make a difference because your pay is going to be based on your points and your rank. So, of course, you want to make rank. I made rank fairly easily in service in that I kept volunteering for schools. I actually either through the civilian acquired skills program or attending school itself through the military, I held 5 MOSs.
What were your MOSs?
I started out as crypto tech, and then they sent me to the installers course. So that was an added skill identifier. And then when I went to the reserves, I didn't have a slot near me as a crypto tech. So they trained me to be a radio operator. And so I worked at a FEMA site as a communication specialist doing radio and teletype, but I was also standby for the crypto tech. They did have one slot, but it was a plot. Someone had it already. So then when I moved away I lived in DC at the time. So when I moved away from there, I came into a unit and they said, well, we don't have any slots nearby for either one of those, but we'll take you on because they can put you in a slot that's not your MOS as long as you're going to be trained. And so instead, I went through the civilian acquired skills program. They said, I was going to be a computer operator. And they went, well, you have more skills at it than what we teach you in the reserve school anyways. So we'll just give you the award. We'll send in the paperwork and get you the award. And so I became an information systems operator. And then I went out on a recruiting tour. And then I came back and they slotted me back into the reserves as I was a platoon sergeant for a heavy junk maintenance unit. They did everything from earth scrapers to God knows what, in vehicles and things like that. But then later on, we picked up a lot of small stuff, everything from sewing machines to night vision goggles.
Wow.
But because of the career progression, I had to go back to my original MOS. So they had to send me back to a refresher school. But in the meantime, I ended up in 5 different military occupations during my time.
That's so crazy. Now you have all these tools and whatnot. That's amazing.
The best part about that is at one point, when I was back in the reserves, I went back down to our tech school and I said, hey, look, I want to get a degree because I didn't have a college degree or anything like that. So I went back down to the tech school and they said, through the adult learning program, we can design a associate degree for you. And I said, great. So they actually designed 2 associate degrees, electronic information systems administrator, and then what was it? Something about a trainer, corporate trainer degree. But I only had to take 9 classes because they took all my military, my civilian experiences and turned them into credits. They said, why should we send you through electronic school when you've already done all this electronic work?
That's amazing. It really worked out. That's amazing. I love that.
Yep. 2 semesters of school and I had 2 associates and a certificate in information security because I'd been a security manager.
So crazy. So because this episode is obviously about benefits. Did you also get like the GI Bill, tuition assistance, or can you pass it on to your kids or grandkids?
Well, unfortunately, back in 1986, late 86, I was young and foolish and I took back my GI Bill money because back then it was just the Montgomery GI Bill and I snatched the money back. So that deleted my GI Bill money. Now, if I had been smart when I went out on a recruiting tour, I could have pushed to get it reinstated, going on to an AGR 3-year but I didn't know, and nobody volunteered to tell me. So I missed out on my federal money, but luckily for me, here in the state of Wisconsin, we have our own GI Bill. So if you're a veteran, check with your state. They gave free tuition. Started out when I took it, it was 50% of my tuition. And then 4 years later, they made it into 100%. And then they later added on a family rider. So if a veteran is rated 30% or more disabled, their spouse and children can use it.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's amazing.
I had a veteran that educated 3 of his kids at the tech school, and his wife took some classes to get a promotion award.
Wow. That's so crazy. All of the benefits that we really don't get told. Like I joined in 2009, and this was when we were transitioning from the Montgomery GI Bill to the post 9/11. And during basic training, they didn't tell us anything about the differences. They said, sign this paper. You are going to be taking $100 out of your paycheck every month for the next year to pay for your Montgomery GI Bill. And then we go to tech school in our first duty station and we're like, we didn't technically need to do that. How can I get my money back? And they're like, oh, joke's on you. You have to fully use your post 9/11 if you use all the benefits of your post 9/11, then we'll give you your Montgomery GI payment back. So I'm slowly getting towards the end of my post 9/11, and you bet I'm going to be trying to get that Montgomery money back. But yeah, it's crazy like how much, benefits that we don't, veterans aren't aware of. I was unaware of the, 30% disability, and then, statewide or whatever. That's just amazing. And, kind of pivoting towards more like healthcare, because I know healthcare is a big, issue. It's a big concern. And most of us know about the VA basic healthcare. But what should female veterans know about the VA healthcare?
Well, we are very lucky. If you are pregnant, you could have your baby at a VA hospital. And or if you're far enough from that VA hospital, which often happens when you're in labor, the VA can pay for it at the local hospital.
Do you have to enroll in that, or how does that work?
Yeah, you will enroll in VA healthcare. You got a VA doctor, and he's supervising your pregnancy. And that's not to say you don't have a civilian doctor. If you have really great work insurance or whatever, you can still use your work insurance if you want a second opinion, or there's some other benefit that you could draw from it. But I'm telling you right now, VA healthcare can be a really good thing. For one thing, you're not going to pay over $18 a month for any medication. So if you're on a $127 inhaler, you can get it through the VA at a lot less money. So all you really have to do is go once a year for your VA physical. And that way your foot is constantly in the door. Once you've gone more than 18 months, the VA system is going to think that you no longer wish to use them, and they're going to drop you from the active roster. You're still inactive, but you're not active anymore. So they're going to drop you. That allows another patient to come into the clinic. Then that's another thing. We have a small clinic at the county line here, and it has 2 doctors and 2 nurse practitioners, and they were going along just fine. The minute I became a CVSO, first thing I did was go to the county fair and start handing out healthcare applications. Join the VA, get in there, get inexpensive meds, blah, blah, blah. I put so many people enrolled into that clinic that they reached capacity. Then they went to the next county over and reached capacity. So my guys started getting letters saying, here, for the next 2 years, go to your civilian doctor and we'll pay for it. That was the beginning of community care. It was called fee-based. So my guys were going out on permanent community care for 2 months or 2 years because we had too many people in our clinic. But that also made the VA recognize that we had a greater density of veteran population than they had thought. So on the next county north of us, they built a huge clinic that does same-day surgery, dental, chiropractics, all sorts of departments. The only thing it doesn't do is overnight patients. That, of course, relieved the load that our smaller clinics were having. So they were allowed to bring more people inside the VA for healthcare. Registering, even if you don't intend to use it, it can be important because it allows the VA to say, oh my gosh, look how many more veterans we have in this area of North Dakota. Maybe we need to build a new clinic.
Yeah, that's something I didn't think about, like how that could influence the services around that area if they truly knew the veteran population. So you said enroll in VA healthcare. Is that on the va.gov website?
Yep, you can do it that way, or we're going to talk about what a VSO is and what they can do for you for free, and they can also help you apply. The good thing about applying is I had a 22-year-old veteran, came home from the sandbox. He was, I think he was National Guard, I'm not sure. He had gone and done his deployment, come home fairly uninjured. So we got him a 20% rating. But then 9 months later, and I enrolled him in VA healthcare. And he said, well, I don't need it. I'm going to go back to work. And my boss already said he'll put me back on the insurance right away. I said, yeah, but you need to go because you really should go once a year. They're going to look for stuff your civilian doctor doesn't based on where you served. And he goes, maybe. Well, 9 months later, his family called me from the emergency room. This veteran had been on his motorcycle on his way to his new job with no insurance when a guy pulled out of a driveway. Yeah, due to the brain injury and compression injury of his spine, he'll never work again. And because of his TBI, he needs direction in his life. Let's put it that way. Family that helps him, takes him to doctor appointments, makes sure he takes his meds and stuff like that. But he's independent enough that they were able to find a small first floor apartment in a house just on the same block. And he lives there, but family, a couple houses down, helps direct his life. But from that, we went, okay, he's never working again. And because he's so young, he doesn't qualify for Social Security disability. He only receives SSI, which is at that time, $850 a month. Not enough to live off of. Through another program called the War Veterans Pension, we were able to get him $950 a month because he was living below poverty.
Wow.
So we can do the financial stuff. But in his case, family called me and said, he may not live through the night. And I said, not a problem. I enrolled him less than 18 months ago. So I called up VA and I said, this is the veteran. This is where he's at. This is the contact at the hospital. They took every penny of his medical bills.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And he spent almost 2 months in that hospital. The larger portion of that, he was in the ICU, obviously not able to be transported.
Right.
And so finally, when he did get stable, they said, okay, is there a bed available in Milwaukee, which happens to have one of the best spinal centers in VA too. So eventually he was taken down to Milwaukee by ambulance, and he spent at least 6, maybe 8 months learning how to walk and do all that stuff all over again. And he didn't have a penny of medical bills.
That's crazy. And that's all because you enrolled him. So can you talk about the benefits of, talking to a CVSO?
Okay. CVSO means County Veteran Service Officer. A VSO, accredited VSO, is someone that goes through training, state and federal, and gets their accreditation. They go through a background check and all that crap. And then they have to sign an ethics statement with the VA saying they will never charge a veteran and that they will attend their training and do all the other requirements. Then the VA says, oh, if other organizations or the organization you're employed with has to be nationally chartered, says you're a good character, we will allow you read access into the VA's computer system. So a VSO, like myself, when I was employed as one, you have to be employed, you have to be paid by somebody so that you have no temptation and somebody's going to pay for your training and all the other stuff. But they sit down with a veteran and they go over all the benefits. They talk about survivor benefits. What your family may be entitled to if you pass away either from something service-related or if you pass away and it's not service-related, but do you qualify under the War Veterans Pension? Will they qualify for a year or more? Stuff like this. And then the VSO helps you do all the paperwork. When I first started, it was all paper. But by the last couple of years, it was all computer. So I would just type all the stuff into the computer, and then they had a little black box like at the bank, and you sign. I hit the button, and boom. It's at the VA. So if you came in later, hey, I just had a baby boy last week. Okay, give me the birth certificate. Well, it usually takes longer than that to get the birth certificate. But I get the birth certificate, I take it and I scan it, and bam, it's into your VA file because at 30%, you're going to get dependent pay. So now it's in the system, and I've registered that child with the VA. They don't get health care from the VA unless you're 100% or individually unemployable, which is a way that you could be highly rated and not able to achieve or maintain good employment because of your service stuff. They will turn around and make you unemployable. They will look you over and say, yeah, you're going to have a hard time. Maybe it's your mental health, whatever. So they will pay you at the 100% rate, even though you aren't quite rated that. So at that point, the family's entitled to CHAMP VA, which is very similar to TRICARE. Not quite as good, but similar. So if you're a retiree, they're going to leave your family on TRICARE. Slightly better. But otherwise, they get CHAMP VA.
That's crazy. I didn't realize that either.
Yep. And education benefits and all, the federal GI Bill they get.
So how can someone find essentially someone like you to start this process?
Okay. Well, every day on LinkedIn, people connect with me and I send them a list of electronic links and attachments that talk about these benefits, and also has a find your local VSO. So that VSO could work for your county, your state, or your Indian tribe, or they could be employed by the American Legion or the Vietnam veterans. But the big thing is they need to be accredited. And because they're accredited, if somebody calls the VA and says, look, this guy charged me money, or this guy totally screwed up my case, never sent in the paperwork, or the VA can investigate, and then they can pull that accreditation, which means job loss.
Yeah, so it keeps the people honest, and I like that.
But most VSOs are veterans themselves, and yeah, they're more interested in serving the family, and they've got a paycheck, so why, a lot of them are okay with it. It didn't bother me. I actually took a $10,000 pay cut to do the job.
Wow. But I'm sure it's because of the service and that feel
Oh, yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. I told you, as abruptly as I left the military, all of a sudden I lost my sense of identity. I didn't have very many friends outside of the military world.
Yeah.
So,
I've talked to
yeah.
several veterans that, that seems to be a very common theme is when we're transitioning out, it's so hard to adjust because, we built this family within the military. And then when it gets ripped away from you, you almost feel kind of like a lost puppy and you don't know, who to go to or, who to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And remember what it was like when you went in the service. You had to learn the language. You had to learn the rules. You had to find out what the socially accepted behaviors and norms were. Well, when you leave service, you have to learn that again, because not only are you, in most cases, going from that 17, 18-year-old child to an immediate adult. You've had this 4-year gap or whatever, and all of a sudden, yeah, you're a civilian adult. What are the adult rules, especially when it comes to drinking and things like that? Because bad behavior on the outside isn't quite the same thing as bad behavior on the inside. So, yeah, it's a big change in how you conduct yourself
And it's
and what
also,
you.
yeah, and it's also kind of like what you experience too, right? Like people in the military, when you're 18, 19, you're experiencing things that other 18 and 19-year-olds don't experience, which does provide you some compensation, right? Tell me why the VA pays compensation and when and why we may be eligible.
Okay. Compensation was created in the early wars, to take care of veterans that were no longer able to go home back to the farm or the factory and work. They've lost a limb or had a brain injury or had shell shock, which we now call PTSD. So that compensation was designed that way. And it was also, there's a dependent indemnity compensation, and that's for our survivors, because if the spouse lost their veteran at war or shortly thereafter, they could compensate the spouse to have a livable income. Okay. So, Vietnam guy, 40 years, and all of a sudden he develops Parkinson's, which is one of their presumptives because of the neurological dysfunction from exposure to Agent Orange. He's been a truck driver all of his life. All of a sudden he can't drive truck, and he can't climb ladders, and he can't work on jobs that are high up, like construction work, and he can't do this, that, and the next job because of his shakes and things like that. So the VA has a compensation system. And depending on the severity of your disability, the number of jobs it's eliminating from you, that will increase your compensation. And it's payable money. And it's anywhere from, you could be rated 0. Okay, you were in a reserve unit, shot a lot of 105 howitzers. Hearing protection was inadequate, especially those couple of years where the earplugs were red. Or if you're out on the range and you're a range control officer, you don't wear both earplugs. You want to be able to hear the guy shouting misfire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're not wearing adequate hearing protection, and you get ready to leave service, or so you take your exit physical and they go, there's been a shift in your hearing. You can actually go to VA and say, look, I want to service connect it so that later on in life, when it gets worse, I can get that 10, 20, I can get those hearing aids for free. I can get the cochlear implants when I go deaf for free. So you can be rated 0 and receiving nothing from VA, except for that automatically has the VA healthcare door open to you. And then at 100% for a single veteran, that's almost $4,000 a month, tax-free.
And that is a decent amount to have tax-free, especially if you're not receiving anything. And especially with some of these illnesses and conditions, you may need that additional care or help.
And the care will be provided for you. ALS. ALS is a presumptive for all active duty. They've shown that nearly for every 3 people that get it, almost always 2 of them are veterans. So they call it a presumptive. You walk in, you say, here's my doctor's diagnosis based on the tests. I have ALS. VA says, bless you, child. We're sorry for that. Here's your compensation money. If you need in-home care services, we can provide it. If you need going to a nursing home, they can pay for the nursing home and still pay your family the compensation because of loss of income for them. Yeah, there's so much that the VA transportation. If a veteran suffers with ALS and he's gotten to the point where he can't drive, and maybe if he's single, doesn't have family, or it's a hardship for the family to drive him to the specialty care at the VA or something, they'll actually send an ambulance or a specialty transport and they'll pay for it.
So when it comes to
So,
compensation, like, does it have to be noted in your service medical record? Or how, like, essentially, if you go from zero, how can you get that compensation post-service?
yeah, we all did it in service. Certain injuries or illnesses, suck it up and drive on. Well, jump off the deuce and a half, twist your knee, limp around for a couple days, eating a lot of ibuprofen, maybe getting some ice packs, or maybe you're on a convoy between camps and you don't have a quote medic, put it in your record, and even then you get treated at the other post. It never gets uploaded to the post where you're stationed. So that just takes witness statements, buddy statements they call them, and your spouse can give them, especially when it comes to things like sleep apnea. Witnesses that saw, when we first got married, he didn't snore, he didn't stop breathing, but 8 years later, maybe a retiree type situation, he sounded like a Mack truck the last 4 years of his military career. People that slept, that just, basic training, if you're still in touch. And it's very easy to find people nowadays. And you can find tour books online that show you, the USS Johnny Smith. I don't remember the name of the ship. So find a tour book out there and say, those are the guys I served with. And now I have the names. I can go back and look and estimate the ages and stuff like that. Find people. I actually found a Korean War veteran Marine that saved my Army guy's life over in Korea.
Wow.
Who could then testify that, yes, the field hospital he was in was overrun in the winter, and he was stuck in the frozen rubble for a day and a half. And he had been shot, which was why he was in the field hospital, but all of his records are gone. There was no record of him being shot, much less having frostbite. But this guy was able to attest to them treating him for frostbite.
That's so crazy.
Yep. Witness statements are a wonderful thing. They're called buddy statements, and they can be from your family. One of my guys, his mother actually saved letters that he had written home. So there we go.
That
automatic record.
I was like, you can't really dispute that when it's like near time letters.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's just crazy to me. So do you have to personally know them, or can you just find someone who possibly was in the area at the same time as you? Like an acquaintance, or like someone knew someone else? Or do they have to directly know you?
Yeah, it has to be more of a direct line, because it's just like a court thing. I saw this happen to this veteran, or I saw this veteran after the events when he was sitting on the bunk in the room we shared with ice packs on his knee and blah, blah, blah. So there has to be some kind of relationship to their knowledge. It can't be third hand. Or you can find historical stuff too. I mean, I went out and Googled my grandfather. I Googled his World War I unit, 325th Infantry, and I found this guy had actually written up about his time with the 320. And at one point it says, and Lieutenant Cook was borne off the battlefield due to shrapnel injuries.
Wow.
Guess how my grandfather got his World War I Purple Heart? German shrapnel.
Oh my gosh, that's so crazy.
So, yeah, it was really cool to read that part of history from my grandfather. Because, of course, he didn't tell anybody, because that's typical.
Yeah, I'm trying to get stories out of my grandpa, who's a Vietnam vet, is very difficult. So I understand.
Well, a lot of wives would come to me and say, why does he talk to you but not me? Because when it comes to your own family, you want your spouse or your child or your grandchild to look at you adoringly and see you as this fine, strong, knight in shining armor kind of guy. And for you to look at them and say, I had to gut a guy because we were in a knife fight. Or I had to, remove a body from a bed so that I could get somewhere to sleep for a couple hours. Those kind of things, no matter how you tell someone that those events happened, or that you yourself experienced this horrifying thing, that they're going to have a moment in their eyes where they're not looking at you like that knight in shining armor. And most veterans, they can't take that. They don't want you to see the ugly side. They don't want you to feel that they're traumatized, even if they are. Even if they know they are, they still don't want to see it in your eye. So they're not going to tell you, but they could tell another GI. So I spend a lot of time in my office sitting on the floor next to my guy who's sitting in a chair, and he's telling me these things, and we're both using a lot of Kleenex.
Oh, yeah. And it's, it's also relating it to like that camaraderie, right? Like you're more open to someone who has been through what you've been through. And I think
someone
that
they know they can trust. And, here, I'll hold on to it for the next hour so that you can breathe a little easier. And then we'll finish what we're doing, and I'll give some of it back to you.
Yeah. So what is the least known benefit that could financially help many of our veterans?
I mentioned it earlier. It's the Wartime Veterans and Surviving Spouses Pension Program. A lot of us get to retirement, and for some of us, that means only a Social Security check, or maybe a Social Security and a small pension. And then all of a sudden we're hit with that. Now, this year will be $185 a month Medicare and a supplemental insurance. And maybe we're paying for dental, and maybe we're paying for vision, and maybe we're paying for cancer insurance because that runs in our family or something like that. So all these health related insurances, and now our income's below our living income is below poverty. So the VA has a program whereby if you served during wartime, you could be stationed in Kentucky or you could be in a combat zone, but you served during wartime. They're going to take your household income and subtract off your household medical expenses. So maybe your spouse is taking that $600 a month medication and other things. If those subtracting off cost of toothpaste, protective undergarments, all that kind of stuff puts you below poverty, the VA can supplement the income back up. For a veteran, it's supplemental back up to 130% of poverty. But for a surviving spouse, it's only back up to poverty. And people will say, well, that's only for the over 65. No, the over 65 don't have to show that they're no longer able to work. The under 65, like my 22-year-old veteran, have to show that there's a medical reason they can't work. So, like I said, his income was $850, and VA was paying all of his medical expenses. So at that time, for a veteran requiring aid and attendance, help with daily tasks of living, some people pay for in-home care, sometimes it's provided by family, but it's still medically required. He received $950 from the VA pension. So he was able to get an $1,800 a month income. And in small town, rural Wisconsin at that time, which would have been more than 12 years ago, he could live on that. And so they get them, like I said, 130% of poverty, and then there's little add-ons like housebound or aid and attendance and stuff that can add a couple $100 more each month. So that helps. Either unable to work before 65 or just 65 and older for the veteran. Now, the surviving spouse has no age requirements, no ability to work requirements. So a lot of times, a lot of spouses, I was able to get them a year of pension just based on the funeral expense from the veteran. Or a veteran who's lost his spouse. All of a sudden, he's got this huge funeral expense. He's 72 years old, or he's unable to work, whatever. So we get to take that funeral expense off the income. Gee, now you're $5,000 below poverty for the year. They're going to pay you $5,000 over the next year, divided up into 12 pieces.
And I'm assuming contacting a
VSO?
Yes.
Yep.
Is how a person could get enrolled.
Right. You can do it on your own. Some people have done it, but most of the time that means that they're not reporting everything they could take off. So they're limiting themselves, whereas a VSO knows exactly what needs to be. And because the veteran and or surviving spouse is living below poverty, just based on qualification for the program, the VSO knows to expedite the claim and how to expedite it and who to expedite it with, which means that the VA has to put it on the top of the stack, not the bottom. So if a VSO is involved and they have a good working relationship with their VA liaison, I could get a terminal status claim done in 2 weeks.
How long does it?
Cancer.
How long does it?
Well, expedites generally have a 90-day window that the VA has to respond in. That's what they're supposed to do. But in certain cases, you call the right person. There are some liaisons that went, oh God, it's Jane again.
It's always about who
But
you know.
yeah, and it was always, okay, we can get this done in 2 weeks, can't we? Because it's a blatant, obvious ALS, Parkinson's, Agent Orange, whatever. Or I can go to the news media.
And nobody
Remember
wants that.
Yeah, when the economy went upside down in '08, my veteran had filed on his own, unfortunately, and gotten denied, then filed his appeal, and it was going round and round, and it had been like 2 years. Well, he was about to lose his house, and the VA wasn't responding to us, and they weren't responding to the newbie, the new VSO, who she doesn't know what she's talking about. And so I just went to the news media. We had a nice little lemonade break in the backyard of his house, and guess what? The next day he got a call.
Crazy
Look
how
in your
that
bank
works.
account. Yeah. So sometimes you have to threaten the club. Other times you offer them a bouquet of flowers and, talk sweet to them and they'll get things done for you. So I could, I knew who to call for what circumstance and stuff like that. And most VSOs either know that or because they're part of the National CVSO Association or at least their state association, they can go onto the forum and say, hey, look, guys, I'm new at this, and this is what I saw, and this is the veteran, and this is what he has, and what do I need to provide for evidence for that? So when I first started out, believe me, the folks that helped me were the people on my forum. The guy that was the county veteran service officer in the next county, he was my mentor. That sent, when I got my guy brain cancer for Agent Orange, the first living veteran to receive an award for brain cancer for Agent Orange. I immediately went on the forum and I wrote up how I did it. Within 2 weeks, I'd gotten his first denial. Then 2 weeks, I got a denial to the appeal. And then I handed him off to a lawyer out in California who has a genetic oncologist who took his blood sample and said, man has no cancer markers. He should never have developed cancer. It obviously came from an outside influence and based on these chemicals in the Agent Orange and these studies being done in Europe and Australia and other places. He said the only logical conclusion can be drawn is that his Agent Orange caused this. The lawyer was able to expedite at the board level, and in less than 90 days, she had his award. So he got awarded 100% service connected because it was obvious he was terminal. And 2 months later, we did his wife's DIC.
That's amazing that you were able to do that. And clearly having someone like you in, Veterans Corners is, extremely helpful. How can people connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's where, I'm there every day. I had a few weeks off there because I had some health issues that I had to take care of, some hospital time and stuff. But get with me on LinkedIn, Jane Babcock, Veterans Benefits Educator. I'm a volunteer. I don't charge for anything. I share my tools with you guys that gives you basic VA 101 benefit stuff. And then you can look through it and say, I got questions about this. Or maybe my dad or maybe my aunt qualifies for this. I think they do. Well, you reach back out to me. We'll do a video. LinkedIn has a great video feature. If you're connected with somebody, you get this little camera icon. You click on it and you can video right away, or you can schedule an appointment for later. And then we'll talk. If you have a group and you want to set me up on a TV or, that has the smart TV that has a video connection for your laptop, I'll do questions and answers. I'll do, classes. You want to talk specific, like auxiliaries. One of the auxiliaries out in California, I did a class on survivor benefits. And I never left my house.
Yeah. And that's like the beauty of, the digital age right now, right? Like we could spread the wealth of knowledge and especially like some of these benefits. For those who are listening, Jane and I did do that LinkedIn video chat, which even though I'm technically a millennial, she was the one that told me, hey, did you know that we could do this? Because I was just be like, oh yeah, let me set up a Zoom or a FaceTime. But yeah, and it was so easy to just schedule like through LinkedIn. I didn't realize that. And another thing too is when her and I talked last week, this woman is a wealth of knowledge of benefits. And I know, this past hour, we've only touched on, a little bit, but she has opened my eyes up to so many other different benefits when we were talking. So please, and I'm sure we could probably make this easily like a 4, 5, 6 hour podcast, every every veteran is different. Every veteran has, different needs and what they're looking for. But she is such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to VA benefits and what you are entitled to or what you can be entitled to, or your family. Like, I am amazed by all the things that even I didn't even realize that we could be entitled to. So reach out to her on LinkedIn. She also has an email called talk.veteran@gmail.com if you also want to email her. And I will also put this in the show notes.
Thank you. And remember, one of the links I send is how to find your local VSO. And I can, that's pretty easy. Highlight VSO rep and then put in your county or your state or whatever, and it'll give you a list. But if you do come across one of the good old boys or one of the chairborne rangers, the guy that kind of half steps through his job, I'll call him back in a week or two. Talk to their boss. If they work for a county or a state, it's real easy to find their boss. But you know what? Every career has the 10% that graduated at the bottom of the class, and they have that 10% whose status of their job makes them lazy. Don't leave that problem child there for the next guy. Go ahead, reach out to their boss, and then go back to the list and find somebody who's more of a bulldog or more of a type A like I was. Somebody that's out there doing outreach and working in the office 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night on paperwork so that they get what they deserve. You've earned these benefits the hard way. Don't leave things laying on the countertop, and don't let your family be uneducated. I always asked veterans to bring their spouses at least for the first meeting, because you suddenly die in a car accident, they have no idea.
And you're so right. Like, we earn these benefits as veterans. Don't wait, weeks or months, because you're essentially leaving money on the table.
Yep. It wasn't until 1969 that women were actually recognized as veterans.
Yes. So, Jane, thank you so much for being on this show. But what is one piece of advice that you feel is the absolute most important?
The absolute most important is to know your VSO. Your VSO is tending training every year to learn the newest and latest and greatest. They share a relationship with thousands of VSOs that can help them make your case stronger, especially if they're new at the job. But once you know them, once you've filed your claim, if things change, things get worse or whatever, do a phone call with your VSO. Let them know. I'm going in for knee surgery. I got to get knee replacement on that knee that's service connected. That's temporary 100% for a minimum of 6 months to a year, plus potential other add-ons like aid in attendance and or 60 over 100 and all these other things that could be added on. They can help you take care of that paperwork. Minimum every 5 years. Sit down with them, say, what's changed? What's been added to the list? Any major health issues you have, make sure that VSO files, and you can file it simply stating, I'm filing for record only because I know it's not a presumptive. But that VSO can take care of everything, and then, God forbid, they see your obituary, they'll reach out to your family and say, come see us. There's potential benefits.
So everyone, please reach out to her. She has that link to find your local VSO. So don't leave those benefits on the table. Jane, again, thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to either one of us. I will add everything into the show notes. Until next time, we will talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone. God bless.